Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt that something wasn't right? No one had said a word. Everyone was smiling. Everything looked perfectly normal. Yet something deep inside you whispered, "Leave." Days later, you discovered there had been an argument before you arrived. Someone had been lying, a friendship was falling apart, or a decision had already been made behind closed doors. And once again, you were right. Now here's the question. Was it just intuition? Or did your mind notice hundreds of tiny details so quickly that your conscious brain couldn't even explain them? Because some people don't simply survive difficult experiences. Their minds change because of them, not in ways that make them fearless, not in ways that make them emotionless, but in ways that make them see what everyone else misses. Psychologists have long observed that prolonged stress and repeated adversity can sharpen certain forms of pattern recognition and environmental awareness in some people. These experiences can leave deep emotional scars, but they can also change the way the brain processes information. Some people call this heightened awareness traumatic intelligence. It isn't about having a higher IQ. It isn't about being better than anyone else. It's about developing an unusual sensitivity to patterns, emotions, inconsistencies, and danger after living through experiences that forced your brain to stay alert. If you've ever wondered why you notice small changes that others ignore, why crowds make you scan every face, why a simple sentence can tell you exactly how someone feels, then stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you may understand yourself better than ever before. And the final sign is the rarest of them all. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt that something wasn't right? No one had said a word. Everyone was smiling. Everything looked perfectly normal. Yet something deep inside you whispered, "Leave." Days later, you discovered there had been an argument before you arrived. Someone had been lying. A friendship was falling apart, or a decision had already been made behind closed doors. And once again, you were right. Now here's the question. Was it just intuition? Or did your mind notice hundreds of tiny details so quickly that your conscious brain couldn't even explain them? Because some people don't simply survive difficult experiences. Their minds change because of them, not in ways that make them fearless, not in ways that make them emotionless, but in ways that make them see what everyone else misses. Psychologists have long observed that prolonged stress and repeated adversity can sharpen certain forms of pattern recognition and environmental awareness in some people. These experiences can leave deep emotional scars, but they can also change the way the brain processes information. Some people call this heightened awareness traumatic intelligence. It isn't about having a higher IQ. It isn't about being better than anyone else. It's about developing an unusual sensitivity to patterns, emotions, inconsistencies, and danger after living through experiences that forced your brain to stay alert. If you've ever wondered why you notice small changes that others ignore, why crowds make you scan every face, why a simple sentence can tell you exactly how someone feels, then stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you may understand yourself better than ever before. And the final sign is the rarest of them all. It changes the way you see your entire life. Underscore, 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 underscore. The decorations. The second notices something entirely different. Who hasn't spoken? Who avoids eye contact? Who forces a smile? Who keeps checking the exit? Who suddenly becomes quiet when another person enters? Most people believe intelligence is measured by how much information someone knows. But another kind of intelligence is measured by what someone notices without trying. People who have lived through unstable environments often become exceptionally skilled at detecting subtle changes in behavior, not because they wanted this ability, because at one point in life, noticing those changes helped them stay safe. Their brains learned that tiny details could predict much bigger events. A change in someone's voice, a pause before an answer, a forced laugh, a sudden silence. Each became another piece of a puzzle. Years later, the habit remains. You don't just hear conversations, you read them. You don't simply look at faces, you study them. While others hear words, you hear hesitation. While others notice confidence, you notice exhaustion hiding underneath it. This isn't magic, it's pattern recognition. Your brain quietly compares thousands of tiny observations with years of stored experiences. Sometimes, it reaches a conclusion long before your conscious mind understands why. And that's exactly why people often ask you, how did you know? The truth is, you rarely know. You simply noticed. But what most people don't realize is that seeing more isn't always a gift. Sometimes it becomes exhausting, because once you begin seeing patterns, you can't stop seeing them. And that leads directly to the second sign. Underscore, 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 People often believe words, you believe behavior. Someone can tell you, I care about you, you can trust me, everything is fine, but your attention goes somewhere else. Their tone, their timing, their consistency, because experience taught you something most people learn much later. Words are easy, patterns are expensive. Anyone can perform kindness for one afternoon. Anyone can pretend confidence during one conversation. Anyone can wear a mask, but maintaining that mask, day after day, week after week, is almost impossible. Eventually, patterns reveal reality. That's why you're rarely impressed by first impressions. You wait, you observe, you compare today's actions with yesterday's. You quietly collect evidence while everyone else rushes toward conclusions. Psychologists call this behavioral consistency. Your brain is asking one question: does this person's behavior match their story? If the answer is no, something feels wrong, even if you can't explain why. Sometimes people accuse you of being suspicious, too cautious, too analytical. But maybe you're simply paying attention, because you've learned that repeated actions tell the truth far better than repeated promises ever will. And once your mind begins tracking patterns, something else changes. You become incredibly difficult to fool, not because you distrust everyone, because inconsistency becomes impossible for you to ignore. Which brings us to the third sign, and this one surprises almost everyone. Underscore, 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 underscore. Think about the last uncomfortable conversation you had. Do you remember every sentence? Probably not, but you probably remember the pause before someone answered, the sigh they tried to hide, the smile that disappeared too quickly, the eyes that looked away for only a second. Human communication has never depended on language alone. Psychologists have found that emotion is expressed through countless subtle signals, facial expressions, posture, tone of voice, and timing. While these cues aren't perfect indicators on their own, together they often shape how we understand one another. Some people naturally overlook these moments. Others can't help noticing them. If you've experienced environments where emotional safety was uncertain, your brain may have become highly attentive to these signals, not because you're trying to judge people, because your nervous system learned that small changes could matter. So when someone says, "I'm okay," you don't stop listening. You start watching. You notice whether their shoulders drop, whether their breathing changes, whether their voice becomes tighter, whether their eyes match their smile. Sometimes you understand someone's emotions before they've admitted them to themselves. That ability can make you an incredible friend, a thoughtful listener, someone who notices suffering before anyone asks for help. But it also comes with a cost. Because once you begin hearing what silence is saying, ordinary conversations are never ordinary again. Every pause becomes information. Every hesitation becomes a question. Every contradiction becomes another piece of the puzzle. And sometimes, the hardest part isn't seeing the truth. It's pretending you don't. Because the fourth sign has nothing to do with observation. It has everything to do with trust. And it changes the way you see every relationship you'll ever have. Sign 4. You struggle to trust. Easy answers. Have you ever noticed that the people who seem the most certain are often the ones asking the fewest questions? Most people love certainty. It feels comfortable. It removes doubt. It promises safety. But your mind doesn't work that way. When someone gives you a simple explanation for a complicated situation, something inside you hesitates, not because you're naturally pessimistic, because experience has taught you something uncomfortable. Reality is rarely simple. People are complicated. Motives are layered. Truth usually hides beneath appearances. You don't immediately accept what you're told. You quietly begin asking questions. Why did they say that? What aren't they saying? What benefits them if I believe this? Most people hear information. You examine it. Like a detective reconstructing a crime scene, every sentence becomes evidence. Every contradiction becomes another clue. This doesn't mean you believe everyone is lying. It means you've learned that the first explanation isn't always the complete one. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as deeper analytical processing. Instead of relying on immediate conclusions, your brain naturally searches for alternative possibilities. That habit can protect you from manipulation. But it also creates another challenge. Because while everyone else reaches certainty, you're still collecting evidence. Sometimes that makes you appear distant. Sometimes people think you're overthinking. Sometimes they mistake careful thinking for mistrust. What they don't realize is that you've learned something life rarely teaches gently. Trust should be earned, not assumed. And once you understand that, you begin noticing another change inside yourself, one that's far more difficult to explain. Sign 5. You feel emotion without absorbing it. Walk into a crowded room. Within minutes, you can almost sense the emotional atmosphere. You know which people are genuinely happy, who feels anxious, who is pretending, who is quietly exhausted, who wants to leave. Most people think observation only involves seeing, but human beings constantly communicate emotion in subtle ways. Tone, breathing, posture, energy, rhythm. Your brain gathers these tiny signals without asking permission. Sometimes you understand someone's emotional state before they've spoken a single sentence. This ability often develops in people who spent long periods trying to predict the moods of others. Not because they wanted to, because knowing someone's emotional state once helped them prepare for what might happen next. Over time, your nervous system became extraordinarily sensitive. The difficult part is learning the difference between recognizing emotion and carrying it. Many people with heightened awareness accidentally absorb everyone else's emotional weight. Someone enters the room angry. Suddenly your body feels tense. Someone feels anxious. You become restless too. Someone hides sadness. Your mood quietly changes. Healthy awareness isn't about becoming everyone's emotional mirror. It's about seeing emotion clearly without letting it become your own. Imagine standing beside a river. You can observe the water. You can study its movement. You can even admire its power, but you don't have to jump in. The same is true for emotions. Recognize them, understand them, respect them, but don't let every emotional current pull you downstream. Because people who learn this distinction discover something remarkable. Calm becomes contagious. Your presence begins affecting other people, instead of their emotions controlling yours. And that's when the sixth sign begins to emerge. Sign 6. You stay calm when everyone else panics. Imagine two people facing exactly the same crisis. One reacts immediately. Their breathing becomes faster. Their voice becomes louder. Every decision becomes emotional. The other person becomes quieter. Their movements slow down. Their eyes begin searching. Their breathing steadies. From the outside, they almost appear detached, but inside, their mind is working faster than ever. Psychologists have observed that repeated exposure to challenging situations can sometimes help people respond with greater composure under pressure, especially when they've developed healthy coping skills. This doesn't happen for everyone, and trauma can also have many painful effects, but some individuals learn to think more deliberately in stressful moments. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening?" their mind asks, "What happens next?" That difference changes everything. Panic narrows attention, awareness expands it. While others become trapped inside fear, you begin noticing exits, resources, options, patterns. It's almost as if your brain quietly switches into observation mode. Have you ever surprised yourself during a difficult situation? Maybe everyone else froze while you instinctively started solving problems. Later, when the danger had passed, that's when the emotions arrived. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. For many people, survival requires staying focused first and processing emotions later. The problem is, if you never return to process those emotions, they don't disappear. They simply wait. Which is why people with extraordinary awareness often experience something others don't understand. They can appear incredibly calm during chaos, yet feel emotionally overwhelmed long after everyone else has moved on. Strength isn't the absence of emotion. Real strength is knowing when to think, when to feel, and when to do both. Because awareness without balance becomes exhaustion, and balance leads to the next sign, one that quietly changes every relationship in your life. Sign 7. You feel different, but you never knew why. Have you ever sat in a crowded room, surrounded by people, laughing, talking, sharing stories, yet somehow you felt completely alone? Not because you hated people, not because you wanted isolation, but because it often felt like you were watching life instead of living inside it, while everyone else seemed comfortable accepting things at face value. Your mind kept asking questions. Why did they say that? Why did they suddenly change their tone? Why does this situation feel wrong? People often called you too sensitive, too serious, too quiet, too observant. Maybe they even made you feel like something was wrong with you. But here's something fascinating. People who develop heightened awareness often describe feeling disconnected from those around them, not because they're better than others, but because they process social situations differently. You notice details, you recognize contradictions, you hear what isn't being said, and that creates distance, not because you want it, because your brain is processing far more information than the average conversation requires. Imagine watching a movie while everyone else only hears the dialogue. You're also noticing the background music, the lighting, the camera angle, the facial expressions, the hidden symbolism. The ending becomes obvious long before it arrives. That's what everyday conversations often feel like. You aren't trying to analyze people. Your brain simply refuses to stop. The challenge is learning that being different doesn't mean being broken. Sometimes it simply means your mind developed in a different direction. And once you accept that, something extraordinary begins to happen. Sign 8. You can predict outcomes before they happen. Think back to a moment when everyone around you believed everything was fine, but something inside you quietly whispered, "This won't last." Maybe it was a friendship, a relationship, a business, a job. You couldn't explain it. There was no obvious proof, just a feeling. Weeks later, everything unfolded exactly the way you expected. People looked shocked. You didn't, because somewhere, long before the collapse, Your brain had already connected the dots. This doesn't mean you can predict the future. It means your mind has become exceptionally good at recognizing familiar patterns. Psychologists often describe this as unconscious pattern recognition. Your brain stores thousands of experiences, then quietly compares them against your present environment. Without you realizing it, it's constantly asking, have I seen this before? How did it end last time? Most of the time, the answer arrives as intuition, not magic, not psychic ability, just years of accumulated observations working beneath conscious awareness. That's why people sometimes say, you always seem to know. The truth is, you rarely know. You simply notice, long before everyone else notices. But there's one final lesson your mind eventually learns, and it's the rarest one of all. Sign 9. You've stopped chasing people's approval. There was a time when you desperately wanted everyone to understand you, to like you, to accept you. Maybe you changed yourself to fit in. Maybe you stayed quiet to avoid conflict. Maybe you apologized, even when you weren't wrong. Then, something changed. Not overnight. Slowly, painfully. Experience taught you a difficult truth. No matter how much you sacrifice, you cannot control how other people choose to see you. Some will misunderstand you. Some will judge you. Some will project their own fears onto you, and none of that changes who you are. The moment you truly understand this, freedom begins. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop chasing conversations that already ended. You stop begging for seats at tables where your presence was never valued. Instead, you quietly begin building your own table. Real confidence isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need validation. It simply exists. And ironically, the less you seek approval, the more respect people naturally begin giving you. Because confidence cannot be borrowed. It must be built. Which leads us to the final sign, the one almost nobody talks about. Sign 10. You no longer see your past as your enemy. For years, maybe you wished your difficult experiences had never happened. You imagined the person you could have become if life had been easier, if people had treated you differently, if you had never experienced disappointment, loss, betrayal, or fear. But today, I'd like to offer you another possibility. What if those experiences didn't only leave scars? What if they also taught your mind to notice things others overlook, to value honesty, to recognize manipulation, to appreciate peace, to understand people without judging them, to remain calm when others panic? Your past doesn't define your future, but it can shape the wisdom you carry into it. Trauma itself is never something to romanticize. It can have profound and lasting effects that deserve compassion and, when needed, professional support. Yet many people also discover genuine strengths as they heal, greater empathy, resilience, clearer boundaries, or a deeper appreciation for life. Maybe the goal was never to become fearless. Maybe the goal was to become aware enough to choose your response instead of living on autopilot, aware enough to recognize unhealthy patterns before they control your life, aware enough to build relationships based on trust, not fear, and aware enough to understand yourself, because awareness is where real freedom begins. So, let me ask you one final question. What if you've spent years believing you were simply different, too quiet, too observant, too cautious, too emotional, too aware? But what if those weren't flaws? What if they were adaptations? What if your mind wasn't trying to punish you, it was trying to protect you? Perhaps the greatest intelligence isn't knowing more facts. Perhaps it's understanding people, understanding yourself, and learning how to move through life with clarity instead of fear. If this video helped you understand yourself in a new way, write one word in the comments: aware. Not to prove anything, but to remind yourself that seeing the world differently can become a strength when guided by wisdom and compassion. And if you're fascinated by psychology, human behavior, emotional intelligence, and the hidden patterns that shape our decisions, subscribe. Because this journey into the human mind is only beginning. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and never stop learning what your own mind is trying to teach you.